In Kenya, the ratio of mental health caregivers to the total population is about 1 to 1 million. And thinking specifically about youths, there are only 2 child and adolescent psychiatrists in the whole country. Given that caregivers for the most part live and work in urban areas, it makes it particularly difficult for youths living in rural and peri-urban settings to access the care that they need. This leads to mental health issues becoming more and more widespread.
Rarely do you see schools mental health professionals, and even treatment plans working together in a well-coordinated way to help alleviate mental illness symptoms.
Shamiri means thrive in Kiswahili, and our mission at Shamiri Institute is to provide accessible and effective mental health interventions to enable young people to thrive. Over the past 5 years, we have developed and tested Anansi, a tiered lay psychotherapy model that allows youths to access quality care. In 2023, we are excited to be expanding our footprint to implement Anansi in rural areas of Western Kenya.
The Kisumu Hub was set up in October 22. Our hub is centrally located and it's surrounded by various counties in the Western Kenya.
I find that most of we rural people are very disadvantaged in terms of such programs, which are majorly found in urban areas, but they are also equally important to us.
So how does Anansi work? The first element of Anansi is the Shamiri intervention, a simple, brief, group-based, and stigma-free program delivered in high schools that has been shown to improve mental health by reducing depression and anxiety symptoms. The intervention combines 3 character strength components. The first teaches youths to adopt a growth mindset. So a growth mindset helps to instill the notion that personal attributes are actually malleable and can improve through effort rather than being fixed. The second component is developing the practice of gratitude in young people. So encouraging youths to find things to be grateful for in their everyday lives. In rural contexts, young people can often struggle to identify
Shamiri Institute is a youth-led organization that champions mental health well-being for young people by developing data-driven tools that enable young people to actualize their life outcomes. My name is Hilda Nyareso. I am a psychologist. I am passionate about mental health, and here at Shamiri Institute, I am the Chief Operations Officer.
My name is Tom. I am the co-founder and CEO of Shamiri. I think culture is very important for us at Shamiri, and I think, as like one of the leaders of the organization, I think the most important thing, that a leader can do is to set the culture of the organization. So the three pillars, behind, kind of like the culture of Shamiri. And the first pillar is a shared purpose. The second, kind of like pillar of our culture is creating opportunities for shared vulnerability. The third pillar of our culture is this idea of creating a sense of belonging. It allows us to move beyond just being a team or to move beyond just being a department or an organization and closer to almost being a family.
Shamiri is an exciting place to work. We work with young people who are excited and passionate about mental health.
It's an organization that is for youth, by youth, and governed by youth. Essentially, it's a place where you can be whoever you want to be. You can find your own space throughout your career, and you can fashion your own pathway.
My journey at Shamiri started as a Thrive Fellow. So the fact that over the years I've been able to grow from being a Thrive Fellow to eventually being a software developer, then that means that in everything that you do, as long as you want to grow, then there is always like an opportunity to grow.
We're the only organization that's been able to scale up to this extent in 3 years. Our evidence suggests that we have been alleviating depression and anxiety for youth across Kenya from and since 2018 and 2019.
At Shamiri, we don't just look at growth, our growth mindset for the individuals that work here, but for the institution as well.
Kenyan kids can also work for Ethiopian kids, especially, at their time of need. African kids in particular, but the African population in general, we've experienced a lot of pain throughout history. We need our own psychology, we need our own epistemology, our own practices, our own methods designed by Africans themselves that are going to help heal us from all that pain.
So far, we've worked with thousands of students and young people in Nairobi, in Kiambu, and now in Makueni County. We want to reach 1 million students in 5 years. We have established that the interventions that we have developed over the years actually work, but we want to take this a notch higher, and we want to hone in on mental health. We want to be known for mental health as Shamiri Institute. And so reaching 1 million youth is no mean task, but we want to do this by ensuring that mental health is personalized, it's accessible, it's affordable, but it's also entrenched in our healthcare system here in Kenya. So that's where we see ourselves in 5 years.
Hi everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar. I'm just gonna share my screen and we'll get started. Cool, so I hope you can all see my screen. How can you participate in today's webinar? We'll be having a couple of live polls and you'll have a chance as well to post things on the YouTube chat to engage among yourselves and engage with us as well. Please use the chat when we get to the Q&A section. This is a chance for you to ask any burning questions that you have that you want answered from members of our team. And finally, to let you know, we are recording today's session. So if one of your friends has missed it or your internet's not great, don't worry, we'll be posting the video shortly after this recording. So today's webinar is about cracking the interview process that's part of our recruitment here at Shamiri. And I'll be joined by two of my colleagues, Cheryl and Herman, who'll be speaking a little bit about their personal experiences having navigated the recruitment process at Shamiri. But before they introduce themselves, I'll quickly say a few words about myself. My name's Rahim. I'm the Chief of Staff at Shamiri. And so part of my role is helping the CEO to think about strategy as well as managing some of our biggest projects, including reaching over 27,500 high school students this year. So I'll give Cheryl and Herman a few moments to introduce themselves so that you know who they are. Maybe we can start with Cheryl.
All right, thank you, Rahim. Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl. I work as an associate under the service delivery teams that we have here at Shamiri. Basically, I work with the director of partnerships and under recruitment. So basically, recruitment of personnel that we work with during our implementation.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. My name is Herman. I'm a research intern. I'm an intern in the research and evidence team here at Shamiri. I work with the rest of the research team to ensure that our product is data driven. Yeah, that's basically it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cheryl and Herman. You'll hear a little bit from them later about their personal experiences with our interview process. So I know some of you are currently recruiting with us and you're engaged in our recruitment process. Some of you are just learning about our recruitment process for the first time. But for those who are already in our process, maybe you've completed our standardized testing and are in the midst of doing take-home tasks. I want to reiterate that we treat recruitment like matchmaking, and we want there to be a fit between yourselves and ourselves. And to do that, we think we have to be clear and transparent on our recruitment process in its entirety. And so this is the recruitment process kind of at a glance. And if you tuned into our previous webinar, then you'll know kind of the steps involved for you to submit an application all the way through to becoming a Shamirian. And I've highlighted here in the red circle where if you have applied, you will find yourself somewhere along here in the process, either completing a take-home task, and shortly for those who are able to meet the benchmark of what we expect from the take-home task, you'll be invited for a phone interview sometime next week. So that's kind of where we are in the process, and that's why we think it will be useful for those in the process currently to hear a little bit about what our interview process looks like. So that's both the phone interview as well as the Super Day. So we'll kick off with phone interviews. So why do we have phone interviews with prospective candidates? There's three reasons, really. The first is to assess your experience and achievements. So it's great for us to read about you through your cover letter and your CV. But often we want to understand a little bit more about your current role, your previous role, and your roles and responsibilities within the organizations you previously worked at. And so really this is a chance for you to shout out about all your achievements and all that you've been able to accomplish previous to this recruiting round with us. The second reason is to have an initial assessment of whether you fit with the culture of the team that you would be joining, as well as the organizational culture. So as you will have seen from the opening video that we showed, culture is huge for us. And we want to make sure that any new recruits to the organization fit within our culture and within the culture of the individual team that they would be joining. And then lastly, obviously, there's only so much you can talk about in your cover letter and CV. And so, again, this is a chance for us to understand a little bit more about you outside of those two documents. So what to expect from phone interviews? They're often led by 1 to 3 Shamirians who will be asking the questions and who you'll get to know over the course of the interview. They tend to last between 20 to 40 minutes, and the length of them tends to depend on what kind of position you are interviewing for. So more senior positions tend to take a little bit longer with a couple more questions than, for example, the intern positions. And then finally, the kind of range of questions that we ask during the phone interviews are pretty diverse. And that's because we want to get a holistic picture of who you are in order to get to know you as best we can before meeting you potentially if you were to be extended an offer. And so I've kind of pasted some of the typical questions that we ask in the phone interviews. Can you speak to a time you worked in a team that was unsuccessful in achieving its goals? As I mentioned, your responsibilities in your current role. So again, this is just for us to get a holistic picture of you, what you're about, and kind of how you approach different scenarios, such as working in a team, as you can see in the first speech bubble. And so I thought as well, I'd include some top tips, so things that we look out for in our phone interviews. The first is we like it when people are able to keep their answers to our questions concise and to the point. Sometimes people think that if they can just speak for a long period of time, they'll eventually get to the answer. But what they don't know is that to the interviewer, it's pretty obvious that you are kind of beating around the bush and going around the question without really answering it. So we do value people who are able to keep their answers concise. We love personal examples in your responses. So for example, the question I showed on the previous screen, can you speak to a time you worked in a team that was unsuccessful? Obviously, we want a personal experience, an example, rather than you kind of speaking to a generic example of difficulties faced in a team. We like for it to be personal because we want to hear how you reacted to a difficult situation, not how you're supposed to react or how a generic person might react. And then the final top tip is kind of to be clear and transparent in your responses. So it kind of links into it being personal. We want to make sure that you're clear and to the point in your responses. So at this point, I'll stop sharing my screen and give a chance to Cheryl to speak a little bit about her personal experience of going through the phone interview process when she was recruiting for a role at Shamiri. So over to you, Cheryl.
All right. So I'm basically here just to give my experience doing the phone interview at Shamiri, and I think for me that was like over a year ago, to be specific, in January, where I got to do a phone interview, and that was basically for a different role that I'm in. of interviews. So phone interviews, or rather the phone interview that I had, were two set on different dates. It was weird for me having to do a phone interview. It's not a typical interview. It wasn't a typical interview day because, first of all, it was via WhatsApp, and that's not what you get when you're called for an interview. Basically, it's either you go in person or you just log on to Google Meet or Zoom and you just get to meet the interviewing panel face to face. So it was weird that my phone interview was via WhatsApp, but I would say it also played to my favor because I didn't get to face the interview panel face to face. So I think I was a bit at ease during doing the interview via the phone. I think something I would say is having stable connection or network. I think that's something that comes into play. I remember when I was doing my phone interview, my internet was not stable and it was not a very good experience because I kept saying pardon, pardon. And it's not good for your first time interview with according to me, basically, that's what I was thinking to myself during that time. So I would say that's like a learning experience to anyone who's going to be doing like just make sure you follow the things the normal things of having like stable internet, whether via Zoom or WhatsApp, and just be in a quiet place as well. Yeah, I think those are things that you might not really take seriously, knowing that it's a phone interview. But it does work to your advantage. Just also not for you not to get tensed around the interview when that happens to you. So just being able to be in a quiet place, having stable internet. But all in all, I did 2 interviews. My second interview involved a role play, which is also not a common thing that you get in interviews, but I guess also because of the position that I was applying for, which was being a clinical supervisor and attending to a student. So I got to do a role play during my phone interview, and it was not something that I had planned for. Yeah, but here we are today. I've evolved into a different role, which I think is good for me. But basically, that was my experience. 2 phone interviews, plays to your favor because you're not able to be seen, so they're not reading your body language, your facial expressions, but they can hear your voice. So just being able to be audible enough and just answering the questions just like you're going to answer during a normal interview. So basically, that's it for me. Rahim.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cheryl. As she mentioned, in the past, these phone interviews have kind of been without video, but this year we'll be introducing video to the phone interview. So they're likely to take place either on Google Meet or Zoom or Teams, one of those platforms. So as Cheryl has said, internet connection is crucial so that we're able to see your face and you're able to hear what we're saying. So I'll share my screen again and we'll move on to talk about Super Day. So this is the last kind of step in our recruitment process. And after this step is when we decide on who to extend an offer to for various roles. So I know for a lot of people, Super Day is like a weird term. Some people don't know what it is. And so I'll kind of briefly go through what we mean by Super Day. So a Super Day is a day hosted at Shamiri's offices, and it's the final round interviews for the very top candidates for positions that we're recruiting for. And it consists of at least 3 interviews and lasts usually from about 9 a.m. to about 2 p.m. And so we provide breakfast and lunch whilst you're in our offices, and you will get to meet all of our staff that are present in the office that day, both informally as well as in the interview setting. And so there are different types of interviews that we have at our Super Day. The first kind are case interviews. So case interviews are scenario-based questions that assess critical thinking and problem solving. And they kind of are a way for us to see how you would respond to situations that you might find yourself in at Shamiri. And so in order for you to kind of get a sense of what that might look like, I'll share quickly an example question that we've had from a previous case interview to give you a little bit of insight into what you might expect from a case interview question. So I'll just draw this up. So imagine a scenario where a company who publishes digital academic content has approached Shamiri, and their content that they usually post on their platform includes both academic content, so the kind of content that would prepare students for KCSE exams, as well as non-academic content. And because our interventions at Shamiri are mental health interventions and are non-academic, they have asked us to share some of our material for us to post on their platform. But because it's non-academic content, they've asked us to provide it free of charge, as they would provide it to their users free of charge, unlike the academic material that they post on their platform. And so we might ask candidates whether they think that this is something that Shamiri should do, or it's not something that Shamiri should do. And so some of the key things to remember when answering case interviews like that is that these kinds of questions don't necessarily have a right or wrong answer. So you might say, yes, Shamiri should share its content with this digital platform. You might say no. But as long as you're giving good reasons for either answer, you could score pretty highly on that question. And so for our case scenario interviews, really what we want to see is how you're able to analyze a problem, gather information, and develop a structured response. So your answers, again, should be clear, and they should be presented in a concise manner. And finally, something to remember about these case-style interview questions is that whoever is the interviewer is likely to ask follow-up questions based on your response. So in the example I gave, you might say, no, Shamiri shouldn't share its content for free with this digital platform because of X, Y, Z. And as the interviewer, I might say, what about the ethical responsibility to share mental health awareness materials with as many students as we can? And then you'd have to kind of respond to that follow-up question based on your initial response. So I hope that makes some sense, but obviously, please populate the chat with any questions you have in case I'm not making any sense. So moving on, the second type of interview that we have at our Super Day is a culture interview. So these questions that we ask of you in this portion of the Super Day is to get a clearer understanding of your fit within the organization as well as within the team that you're joining. So, for example, one of the roles that we're currently recruiting for is the intern in the research and evidence team. And so not only do we want to assess if you're a fit for Shamiri, but we also want to assess if you fit within the culture of the research and evidence team. So what does that culture might look like? So for that team, they love data. And so you would have some comfort talking about data and new things when it comes to data analysis, as well as being able to keep abreast of the latest kind of innovations when it comes to research in the mental health space. So I'll give a few kind of example questions that might be asked in a culture interview. So the first is, how do you handle tight deadlines? And with those tight deadlines, how are you able to ensure that you have a good work-life balance? And so again, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer for this. It will depend on your personal approach to handling tight deadlines, and we're not looking for a specific response. Another example of a question we might ask in a culture interview is to tell us in a few sentences how you have adapted to changing circumstances in your team to achieve a positive outcome. And so someone who's interviewing with us might say that a project that they were working on, the budget for it was cut, but they were still able to achieve a positive outcome by redistributing resources towards the most important tasks in the project, or something like that. So yeah, those are the kinds of questions that we ask in the culture interview. And then finally, at our Super Day, we have a reading exercise. And whilst both the case interviews and culture interviews are done individually, this reading exercise is done with other candidates that are present at the Super Day. And so it's a chance for us to see how you work in a group setting, and how you respond to different things in a group setting. So you'll have a chance to speak with, interact with, work with other candidates that are present at the Super Day. And we'll kind of be a fly on the wall, kind of observing how you try to work with your fellow candidates. And so I know that's kind of shrouded in mystery, but we like it that way because for that particular exercise, we want you to kind of respond to it as it's given to you. Cool. So quickly before we delve into the Q&A, I'll give a chance to Herman to speak a little bit about his experiences with joining us for a Super Day at Shamiri.
Hi everyone. My experience with joining Super Day at Shamiri was, it was really recent. It was 6 months ago. I remember walking in and I was handed a paper with all the interviews that I'm going to be attending for the day. I remember thinking this is a very peculiar type way of doing interviews, because I've never really been in an interview process where I need to be in 4 different interviews in the same day for the same role. So yeah, that was a bit new for me. It was also a bit interesting seeing how the office is. It's a nice office. It looks really good. Honestly, I didn't really expect that. But yeah, it was an interesting day. I met some interesting people. I had conversations with a lot of people. It's generally a fun day, but be prepared. You're going to see a few things that maybe you're not used to seeing, but such is life. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Herman. So I think with that, I've kind of run through what our interview process looks like and some tips to help you kind of get prepared for both the phone interviews and the Super Day. So I'll now turn my attention to the chat box for any questions that people have. And yeah, we'll take questions now. So I'll take some, as well as I'll hand over to Herman and Cheryl if they want to respond to particular questions that are posted in the chat. One question that we've been getting this week is about the Test Gorilla standardized testing that we ask candidates to complete. We ask all candidates to complete this to progress to the next stage of our recruitment process. Some people have been asking why those tests are so difficult. They're difficult because we hold our candidates to a high standard. We want to make sure that we are hiring the best possible candidates for the roles that we're recruiting for. And it's hard for us to read CVs and cover letters from thousands of applicants. And so we use this testing to see if you have some of the skills that we think are necessary for some of the roles that we are recruiting for. Cool. So the first question that I can see in the chat is, do you send rejections to candidates who have not progressed? And the answer is yes, we do send rejections to candidates who have not progressed. And we do this at each round of the process. So candidates will have already received emails saying that they haven't made it to the next stage if their standardized testing scores were not what we were looking to see. Similarly, after you complete the take-home tasks and we are able to read all of them, candidates again will be notified if they've made it to the next stage of the process or not. Again, after the phone interview, and again after Super Day. Question here, does it mean when you get a rejection, you didn't qualify for the next stage of recruitment? Yes, that's exactly what that means. Oh, a good question here. How long does it take for the candidate to receive final feedback after the Super Day? So after we complete the Super Day, they often end at 2 or 3 p.m. The day that we have them. After that, the Shamirians who are a part of the Super Day process, the interviewers and everyone that's in the office that day, we kind of congregate and make decisions together as a team, as an organization, about who we think is best positioned for the roles that we're recruiting for. And we try to make a decision that day on which candidate we'll be extending an offer to. So after the Super Day, you can expect to wait as little as 1 to 2 days to receive final feedback. Question here, suppose you don't have any experience at all for intern position. How would you advise a candidate to answer experience questions in such a scenario? Great question. I think the way to do that is to speak about scenarios that you might have found yourself in at university. So at university, if you've been working on group assignments, that would be a chance for you to talk a little bit about how you work in a team. Similarly, when you were kind of completing homework assignments at university, if kind of circumstances change in a particular way that meant you had to react to complete your assignment, that might be something that you can talk about as well. So yeah, I would advise you to draw on any and all personal experiences that you have if you haven't had experience in a work setting before. How long does it take to be contacted after doing the take-home task? So I believe the deadline for take-home tasks was either yesterday or today, depending on what position you are applying for. So it takes our team a couple of days to go through all these responses. And so I think you could expect to hear on Tuesday or Wednesday about feedback on your take-home task. Are candidates at a disadvantage if they are in the interview process for 2 positions concurrently? No, they're not at a disadvantage, although we might ask before, if you were to make it to the Super Day stage for both roles, we might ask if you're able to kind of focus on one role going forward. But that would kind of be a decision that would be at our discretion, and we'd kind of speak to you about that before the Super Day stage. But no, you wouldn't be at a disadvantage at this stage. What support or feedback mechanisms does Shamiri have in place to assist and provide constructive feedback to candidates who may not be successful in the hiring process? Great question. So actually, over the last few days, myself and others in the team have been responding to requests for feedback for people who have not made it to the next stage. And so we try to give holistic feedback about different parts of your application and what we were looking for, and where maybe you were not able to meet the expectations that we were looking for. But I will emphasize that if you don't move to the next stage of our process, that isn't a reflection on you and your qualities and your talent as an individual. It's more about how we think that you would fit in the organization. So I'm sure that people who we turn away at each stage of the process, I'm sure that they'll go on to achieve incredible things. Just that those things won't be with us for that position. But yeah, we do try to give holistic feedback about your application if you ask for it. Someone asking about how they could join the organization. Yeah, the way to do that is to apply on our careers page, which can be found on our website. Question here about a specific take-home task that was exclusively done in our programming language. So if an assignment is given to you in a particular programming language, it's because that is the language that is primarily used by that team and team members that we currently have on the team. And so in order for you to be a fit, you would also need to be able to be comfortable with that programming language. And so that's why that would be the one that was chosen for you to complete your task with. A question here about our remote/hybrid work model. So we have one work from home day a week every Wednesday. And that's currently our policy on working from home. Are the take-home assessments reviewed on a rolling basis or after the deadline for submission? So they're usually reviewed after the deadline, and the deadline is today. So from Monday, we will be reviewing the take-home assessments. Does Shamiri accept applicants outside Kenya? Yes, we do accept applicants outside Kenya, but it does mean that your application has to be at such a high standard that we think that you would be meriting of an offer. So yeah, the expectations are a little bit higher for those applicants outside of Kenya. Could you extend the deadline for the submission of a take-home task? So for that, you would need to reach out to the contact person in the email that you received with the take-home task. So at the bottom of the email, it should say, if you have any questions, please get in touch with XYZ. So this is your chance to get in touch with XYZ to explain why you might need an extension. But yeah, we do that on rare occasions if there is a valid reason. I think I've answered all the questions that I can see on the chat, but I'll give people a couple more minutes to ask any further questions that they have. And if there aren't any, we can wrap up. Okay, a few more questions. Does a candidate's success at each stage depend only on the performance of the candidate at that stage, or do you use their scores from the previous stages to determine whether they proceed? So I think this depends on how far along you are in the recruitment process, right? So if you've made it to the phone interview stage, then we kind of have previous things to inform whether you'll go on to the next stage. We have your test gorilla scores, we have your take-home assignment, internal scores, and we have the phone interview to reflect on. So we do try to reflect on all three before making the decision whether or not to go to the next stage. But obviously for the first stage, kind of your initial application and test gorilla, that's all we have to base our decision on whether you go to the next stage. So it depends on how far along the process you are, on whether previous stages determine your performance. Do you provide expected/sample answers on the take-home task? We don't usually provide sample answers, but again, if you want to get in touch with the contact person in the email, I'm sure that they'd be happy to share the R script that we were looking for. Do you already have a set date for the Super Day? Yeah, we do have 2 days in mind for the Super Day. And if you make it to the phone interview stage, those dates will be relayed to you. Is it possible to get your results after each recruitment stage? Yeah, if you email the contact person, they can kind of share with you your test gorilla scores, or they can also share with you where you excelled or where you fell short on the take-home tasks, so that you have some idea of how you might be able to improve in future applications or outside of Shamiri. Great. I think those are. Oh, sorry. Another question here. Question about the source of funding for Shamiri. So I'm not really sure how that relates to recruitment. But if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to give you the spiel about Shamiri's funding and how sustainable I think it is. But I think that there aren't any more questions that I can see on the chat. So I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. I know it's a Friday afternoon, and I'm sure people have grand plans for this evening and the weekend. So I hope everyone has a good weekend. And yeah, for those of you who are still in the recruitment process with us, I wish you the best of luck. And hopefully I will get the chance to meet some of you in person at our Super Day. Thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.